Hi Soma, my name is Amanda. Thanks so much for joining us for Church at Home. We're excited to offer in-person services on Sundays at 9:30 and 11 at Holler Mill in Hickory, North Carolina, and online services on Sunday at 11 a.m. If this is your first time joining us, I want to let you know of some resources and ways to stay connected. If you're on a Facebook watch party, make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook to stay informed about everything we have going on. Before we head into a time for worship and message, let me pray for us. Hey God, thank you so much for bringing us here together. Online and all around the world, we're gathering to worship you. We're here to honor you because you are amazing, because of your amazing love for us, because of the sacrifice of your Son. We come here to worship you today, and we celebrate you and everything that you have for us. We believe the best is yet to come. Bless this worship. In Jesus' name, amen.
Hey Soma, I hope you guys are doing well wherever you are. I want to say a special thank you to everybody who's a part of our church family and you're joining online in this season, right? Staying dialed in on what God's doing, staying a part of the life of our church by joining us on Facebook Live or YouTube or whatever that looks like for you. It's been an amazing season despite everything, and God's worked in and through people's lives. It's been an awesome summer. But we're headed into the fall, so a special shout out to all of our leaders in education. All the teachers, all the administrators, all of the students who are headed back into a new school year, and all of us who are making some decisions, some hard decisions, maybe some adjustments to serve our students and our families well. We're praying for you, we're grateful for you, and we believe that in spite of everything that's been going on, you're gonna have an amazing year. The best is yet to come. Here over the past few weeks, we've been in this series called Kingdom. And the whole series is meant to remind us where our true allegiance lies. It's with Jesus. And so in a season of life with a lot of unknowns, in a season where it feels like culture and the political landscape, it's more polarizing than maybe ever, where many people are on edge, full of fear and anxiety, it is nice to know that the King is on the throne. And so even though our circumstances may change, what we say in this Kingdom series is that our God doesn't change. He hasn't changed. He's not going to change, and neither does his truth. And so that brings me a great deal of peace. So last week we had a special guest join us for our Kingdom series, Dr. John Perkins. Now I want to encourage you, if you missed last week, you need to go back and you need to go to YouTube or listen on podcasts or whatever and take that message in. Last week our focus was on reconciliation and unity in the local church, and I can tell you that Dr. Perkins has spent his entire life focused on that. So this week, we've got another friend that's joining us in that same conversation. Pastor Miles McPherson. He pastors the Rock Church in San Diego, California. A few years ago, I had the privilege of attending Pastor Miles's church in San Diego. And I can tell you this, it's a beautiful sight to see. Over 20,000 people gather together weekly there to worship. And it's as diverse as Southern California is. It's a beautiful move of God. And Pastor Miles has lived this message. He has two black granddads. He has a black and a Chinese grandmother, and he has a white grandmother. He was always that kid who was too white in his black neighborhood that he grew up in, and he was always seen as black to all the white kids in their neighborhood, right? And the other thing that's crazy about Pastor Miles' story is he has immediate family who have served in law enforcement. So it's a unique grace on his life to speak to the tensions that we've experienced this past year. Before he went into ministry, Pastor Miles was also an NFL player with the San Diego Chargers. And while in the NFL, he describes his early experience as just living for himself, chasing women, chasing drugs. And then Jesus got a hold of his life one early morning. And while he was strung out on cocaine, he gave his life to Christ. And he dropped drugs all in the same day. And then he became known as the guy in the locker room. He became known as the Jesus guy. And so after the NFL, he pursued his calling into ministry. He goes into seminary, he becomes a youth pastor. And then in 2000, he planted the Rock Church in San Diego. At the beginning of this summer, when all the protests took place, right, there was this huge tension between the black community and law enforcement. Pastor Miles, he calls on a bunch of San Diego churches to come together and to pray for their city, to pray for the nation, for reconciliation and healing. And so they take a stand for unity that included over 100 local San Diego churches, local officials, local PD. He is a champion of Jesus and Jesus' cause, and I could not be more happy to have him join us for our Kingdom series. Take a look at this interview with Pastor Miles. Hey, Soma, thanks for joining us today. Everybody who's watching, you don't even have to be a part of our church family to lean in this season, and I pray this feeds you well. We're joining Pastor Miles McPherson from San Diego. He leads the Rock Church, and he's a leader of leaders and just an amazing man of God. He's written a book called The Third Option, and he was one of the people that I wanted to speak into our Kingdom series. And I said, man, if we could just get him on a call and just have him talk around the premise of the third option. He's got a lot to say around unity, around reconciliation, everything that's been going on this summer, around race in the church, and just what all that looks like. So thank you so much, Pastor Miles, for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about this.
Yeah, brother. So how's the weather in sunny San Diego?
We're in a heat wave. I think it's going to be 80 or 90 today. So it's a little hot, no humidity, no bugs for all you East Coast people. So I grew up in New York, and I'm so glad to be away from that.
Man. Hey, so they know a little bit about you. Everybody, at least in person, knows a little bit about you. But for everybody who's new to Miles McPherson of the Rock Church or what you do, just kind of like a quick bio for people who are watching.
Yeah, I grew up in New York, in Long Island. In 1982, I was drafted to the Los Angeles Rams. Got cut, played for the San Diego Chargers for 4 years. My first 2 years, I was doing cocaine and chasing the honeys. Got saved, stopped doing cocaine, and one day got back with my girlfriend the same day. We got married that year, 36 years ago. Went strictly right into ministry as far as sharing my faith. I played 2 more years with the Chargers, but sharing my faith. Then became a youth pastor, and in 2000 started the Rock Church, so we're 20 years old.
Man, that's amazing. I'm a bit of a Chargers fan because I'm a Phillip Rivers fan. I went to NC State, and my freshman year was his senior year, so I'm a fan. But yeah, we're going to jump into the third option. So you wrote a book, and I had the privilege of two things for context for anybody who's watching this. I had a chance a few years back to go and attend the Rock Church, and you kind of joke in your book that you lead a Skittles church. It's just like so diverse, people from every background, color, and it's so true. I mean, you reflect the diversity that is Southern California. It's amazing to see. Looks like heaven. But also I had the chance to hear your message, The Third Option, a couple of years ago, right when the book came out. And I felt at the time it was such a prophetic word. And it feels like now more relevant than ever this summer with everything that's been going on. And so we want to continue a conversation around race in the church. Last week, we had an opportunity to hear from John Perkins and his One Blood message. And this week we get a real privilege of hearing you and The Third Option. And I want to lead off talking about one of the things you begin in the very beginning of the book. You start talking about mistaken identity. And one of the phrases that you say in the book, you say that, we have so much more in common than we do different. So many more things that should bring us together than divide us. And so if you would talk a little bit about kind of your experience with that and why we have a tendency to kind of gravitate towards division instead of unity, and your understanding of like the things that we have in common.
Yeah. Well, if you watch television or any conversation about race or politics, which is maybe even worse, it is a us versus them culture. And you feel like you have to be for or against the police, for or against Black Lives Matter, for or against the president, or Republican, Democrat, whatever it is. And once you pick one side, you are the enemy of the other side. You can't agree with them or you're a sellout. And so people feel divided and forced to be on a side against another side. In Joshua chapter 5, Joshua is leading the Israelites into the promised land, and he's confronted by the commander of the Lord's army. And Joshua says to the Lord, "Are you for us or our adversary?" Those are the two sides that he gave the commander of the Lord's army. And the Lord said, "No, neither. There's a third option." And in our culture, we have to decide, are we going to fight the us versus them battle, or are we going to build the kingdom of God? I appreciate y'all in the Kingdom series, because the kingdom of man is about division, us versus them. The kingdom of God is about unity. And so instead of us being activists and arguing about race from an activist perspective, we have to be more prophetic and be in the kingdom, which is all about unity, and come from the point that the third option is that we give honor or value to what we have in common, namely the image of God, that we're all made in the image of God. We have to start there. We all love our sleep. We all love our food. We all love our family. We all bleed red. All that's, I can go thousands of things that we're the same. But if we see each other as all made equally in the image of God, our humanity is the same. Racism, by definition, says you are less human than me. The image of God in you is less valuable because of your color, because of your tribe. If you're Africa's tribe, if you're India, it's a caste system. We find reasons to put people below us. But if we start with, no, we're the same. If we start there, that we are more similar than different, and our uniquenesses add to our similarity. In other words, we're all human, but God gave all these humans different perspective, colors, hair texture, accent, and created variety in one race of people. And so we have to start with, how are we similar? And then how do our uniquenesses bring variety to that similarity? And so the book is a tool guide to how you can give honor to our similarities. And then there's also an e-course of 6 sessions for small groups to go through this and actually live this out.
Yeah. And that's something you have a unique grace on your life in that you like your grandparents, for example. I know you've mentioned this before. Talk a little bit about the diversity in your family background that really kind of helps you, and even your lived experience that helps you to navigate some of this in ways that, it's just a grace on your life that God's given you. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I have actually they're all passed, but I have a white grandmother, half Chinese black grandmother, 2 black grandfathers. And when my white grandmother married my black grandfather, one, they had to go to a different state because it was illegal where they lived. Right. And 2, my white grandmother's family disowned her, so we never met them. They lived 15 minutes away. I never knew about them growing up. Never met them, never heard of them. Wow. And I remember, really, it was not an issue. It was like just grandma's there, but her family, we never spoke of it. They just cut her off. And so, and I lived in a black neighborhood, went to school in a white neighborhood, so I got harassed in the white neighborhood because I wasn't white. Got harassed and called names in the black neighborhood because I wasn't black enough. But yet my family, we had the United Nations, right? Right. And so, and football teams were usually diverse, so we got along there. So there was always this battle of, why can't we all get along? And then when I was 8 years old, Martin Luther King was killed, and I remember thinking, what do we do? So this has been part of, all of us as minorities, part of our life, all of our lives, and for generations past. Yeah.
That's so good, man. I think for most people, for a lot of people anyway, they've got some element of that, maybe not as rich as what you've got. And so for some of us, if we're not careful, one of the things you talk about in the book is we have a tendency to live in a bubble. We have a tendency to live kind of with our own group, talk about in groups and out groups, live with people who look like us, shared lived experience, act like us. We tend to gravitate towards that because it's comfortable. And if we're not careful, over time, really lifelong, we can have blind spots. There's a bunch of different types of blind spots. So if you would talk a little bit about that, because I know there's a lot of people like myself who in this season, I'm more aware of my blind spots than I were before. I'm processing in a way that and I've told church family, I'm not racist, but I haven't always been anti-racist. Like I've always been, there's been times where I've been complicit. There's been times where I've heard a joke or heard somebody say something or saw an action or whatever, and I didn't do what was necessary in the moment. So there's blind spots in my past and in my story. So unpack that a little bit for people who are listening.
Yeah, a blind spot is not knowing what you don't know. And so for all of you listening, if you have a blind spot, which you do because you don't know everything about everybody, it's just impossible. It doesn't make you bad. It just makes you human. A social narrative is a story that shapes how we see the world. Based on the information we see from our family, our friends, our neighborhood, we had an experience. And that experience said, these people are safe, these people aren't safe. These people are smart, not smart. You could trust the situation. We were told all that. And it wasn't that it was malicious necessarily or even bad or necessarily completely wrong in the sense that it was malicious. It's just the incomplete story. So that means all of us have been taught this information and created blinders. The blind spot is what we don't even know outside of what we've been taught. So it's impossible not to have a blind spot. It's like I was telling somebody the other day, if a woman in my staff said, I think you don't treat women right, Well, I could say, yes, I do, and she could even say, how do you know? I don't even know what I don't know. So, and by the way, no one's ever said it to me, but I want to know what I don't know. So a blind spot is the gap between the intent of what you say and the impact of what you say. If you have ever said, I don't see color to a person of color, your intent might have been to build a bridge, I assume. The impact is offense, because when you say that to a person of color, what you're saying is, I don't see, acknowledge, recognize what you are and all that comes with it. So you just invalidated my whole life experience. And so the intent is to build a bridge, but the impact is a blind spot. You can be racially offensive and not necessarily be racist. And so when people tell you things that you don't think is true, you need to step back and let me learn about maybe what I don't know. I tell guys when I talk about blind spots, go up to some women in your life and ask them if they think you're creepy. And guys are like, I'm not going to ask that, because guys are creepy, right? And some guys are so creepy, it's so normal to them, they don't even know it, right? They just think it's normal. But it could be a blind spot. Some guys are just intentionally creepy, as we know. But yeah. And so I think that if we can all step back and humbly say, God, open my eyes. The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Open my eyes to maybe what I don't know.
That's so good. Yeah, and that's my lived experience as well. I mean, I have family, extended family. You know, a lot of times it's generational too. That's my experience, is that, you know, the tighter you were, because we're in North Carolina, we're closer to the South here, the tighter we were to segregation by age, you know. So if you have great grandparents or grandparents, you hear a difference. You can, depending on the generation, you'll hear different things said. And you're kind of like, the next generation's down, like, bro, you can't say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, that's not racist. Like, no, that's offensive. You can't say that. You know? And it goes both ways. I mean, it goes all different types of ways. Another thing that I loved about your message in the third option, and to me, this kind of like, this is everything, is when you start talking about the false dichotomy that we live in, where it's an us versus them, and, you know, who are you for? And if you're for this group, then you're against this group. And I love, you know, a few years back, you did a message that spoke directly to this, where you basically gave all the different options, right? And so if you could kind of unpack that a little bit, what that false dichotomy looks like. And when you started talking about, you know, are you for the police? Are the killings justified? Are they unjustified? That kind of thing. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, you know, if an alligator and a bear had a fight, who would win? Let me give you the answer so we don't have to take too much time. It depends if they fight in the water or on land. If they fight in the water, the alligator wins. If they fight on land, the bear wins. In the world, and again, we're, as believers, we're citizens of heaven, so we're supposed to bring heaven to earth in our behavior, in our perspective. But often we're living based on the rules of the world. Most of the conversations I get into about race are political, or they come from a perspective that's worldly, not kingdom.
Right.
And I would encourage all the people in your church, the people watching wherever you see this, to ask yourself, am I coming from this from a biblical perspective or a worldly perspective? And that's fighting in the water is the world. That's the us versus them. In other words, when I have a race conversation, and by the way, I call it a race consultation. In the e-course, you know, we have a whole class on blind spots. We have a whole session on race conversations, yeah, and turning them to race consultations, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, if you fight the us versus them, you're coming into every conversation trying to win an argument. I have to win, you have to lose. That's what you hear on television. That's the difference between Fox and CNN. They're arguing with each other. That's the argument. And that's the world. And what side are you going to be on? And if you're not on the right side, they cancel you. That's the worldly system. Right. As believers, that's not our battle. You don't have to win an argument. And guess what? You don't even have to get in an argument. You really don't. Our role is to build the kingdom. And so the number one question I have there, and I'm sure there's many, is how well do you love people who don't agree with you? This is big. If someone calls you names, I just watched a video on TV where this guy was yelling out of a car, you know, you end this, just cursing. It was horrible. As in the and vice versa. I mean, in the kingdom of God, as hard as it is, God says, I want you to love your neighbor as yourself, and your neighbor is everybody.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people now who are using Black Lives Matter as an excuse not to engage. And God said, listen, if you're going to bring heaven to earth, you have to love your enemy as well as your friends. If you're going to fight in the water and try to win an argument, you're going to fall into the trap of the devil. And so that's not the battle. The third option is I have to love you. Is that hard? Yes. But Christian, who said do the easy things? I mean, you know, I was talking to a guy the other day. He's a white guy getting in this discussion with his peers. And he's like, I'm so frustrating because people, they just can't talk about it. I'm like, welcome to the club. It is a difficult road for people who don't want to learn. And that's why I applaud your church. I applaud you for saying, listen, I want to be a better Christian. I want to love people better. Justice and equality is a God, kingdom of God thing. It's not a political thing.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, I think it's Revelation 7, fact check me, but where it starts to describing what heaven is going to look like. And it's every tribe and it's every nation, it's every tongue. And I've told our people in this season, if your allegiance is more to a political ideology or more to even a national identity, you've missed it. If your primary allegiance is there, you've missed the mark. I mean, your primary allegiance is Jesus. I'm grateful to live in the country that I live in. I've got my own opinions about policy or some of these other things, but all of that is secondary, way, way below my primary allegiance to Jesus and who he asked me to be and how he asked me to engage other people. So I love that. That's so good. Yeah. Who are you for? Who are you against? And the reality is, there's that third option.
And unfortunately, the church is known for what we're against.
Mm.
We're always saying, we're against this, we're against this, we're against this, instead of saying we're for love and we are perfecting our ability to love people. Doesn't mean you have to agree with people. Doesn't mean you have to endorse the people you love, but we're not really good. We're not really good at loving the people who we don't agree with. We're really good at justifying why we disagree with them. And that's not the biblical stance Jesus told us to take. So it's a radical shift that people have to make. And for some, it's very uncomfortable. And guess what? That's the gospel. That's the gospel.
That's so true. The whole reason why we want to have these conversations for church family and really anybody who will listen, who will lean in, is one of the points you make in the book is that truth is love. And so I'm robbing everybody who I lead an opportunity to become more like Christ if we don't stop and navel gaze and go, okay, where are my blind spots? What do I need to get better at? How do I need to love and serve people better? If Soma, which is kind of, our whole vision is uncommon unity. Our whole vision speaks to 1 Corinthians 12:12 and Ephesians 4. Even though there are many members, there's one body. Even though there's different lived experiences and different economies and different colors and different all that kind of stuff, man, you were created for one another. So when we shelve all those other things and we step into what God wants for us, man, it's so much more beautiful. But we've got to establish what that is, which is kind of the point. This is the moment we're in as the church, where in the South at least, and I know really everywhere, the church has been complicit in some areas. We've been quiet in some areas, and definitely race. Sometimes Sunday, this is another thing you speak in your book, Sunday can be one of the most segregated spaces. It looks like lunchroom, high school lunchroom, cafeteria kind of moment. Speak to that. Speak to what are some of the things you think we can do as a church or other churches can do to bring about unity, to bring about diversity, to make sure that we're loving and serving people and creating that type of culture.
Yeah, well, of course I'm biased. Get the book, The Third Option, right? And
yeah, we'll make that available for anybody who's watching this. So yeah, sure.
Get the book, but also get the e-course, because the e-course, I tested this e-course with the police here in San Diego.
Okay.
And actually, there was 15 law enforcement agencies that went through the e-course, representatives from 15 law enforcement agencies. And I just did a teaching for the DA's office, 1,000 employees. And so that's how I tested the content. Now, we want to take churches through that small groups. But when you go through it, and what we asked them was, why was it different than what you've experienced before? And they said, it causes us to look in our own heart. In the South, and in all churches, we've created like the NBA, our own little bubble, that we come in here and we create an environment that's safe for us.
Right.
And God said, no, you're supposed to be salt of the earth and a light of the world. And it's when you go out into the world that you realize, man, my Christianity is kind of bumping up against culture. Exactly. Man, I have to change. Exactly. And it's uncomfortable until the change happens.
Right.
And so we have to, this is a perfect opportunity. Someone once said, don't waste a good crisis. This is a perfect opportunity to step out and say, listen, I'm going to deal with some stuff and stop accepting that I've created an own bubble for myself based on my biases. And you may feel like, am I not as good a Christian as I thought? Oh, we're all not as good a Christian as we thought. The heart is deceitful and desperately wicked. So let's step out with all the people talking about this, all the great content that is there for you. This book is a tool for you to help you walk down that road. When in this e-course that I have, the goal is that people walk together with partners and do the homework together as partners instead of getting thrown to the wolves. So I think the next step is to start to live it out. The truth is not information. The gospel is not information.
Yeah.
The gospel is a person of Jesus, and it's a relationship with that person that's not learned here as much as experienced here.
Yeah. And I think that's so true. And I think I think part of our issue is proximity. So when it comes to blind spots, when it comes to lived experience, I begin to understand better some of the prejudices, some of the racism, some of the things that I've struggled with maybe historically. The tighter I get to people who don't have my same lived experience, the tighter I get to people who don't look like me, the tighter I get to, and it's true for race, it's true for any other thing too. Like there's 100 other things that the church is, we don't want to be known for what we're against, we want to be known for what we're for. And so I think it's just the more that we can get close to people.
And Mike, let me say this for all the people out there, the people who you may not have a lot of knowledge about, they're amazing because God made them.
Yeah.
People are amazing. And I know you may have had people tell stuff to your ear about those people. Don't believe it. Go meet people and spend time with people and realize, wow, they're just like me. They want to raise their kids. They want to live in a safe neighborhood. They want to get a job. They want to, develop their gifts just like everybody else. And so the devil has us hunkered down to try to protect our little environment when we're missing out on the kingdom of God.
That's so good. We as a church, we want to create vehicles for people to step outside of normal. So whether that's an international trip or serving opportunities or whatever. But I'm like you. I found the place that I grew the most in better understanding different people who had a different lived experience than me was in sports, and specifically in football, because it's just the ultimate team sport, and everybody comes from, like, everybody's different. Everybody who's there is different, and it was just a great experience. But also the international travel side of things, spending some time in Central America, spending some time in Africa, worshiping with other churches on other continents and going, this is crazy. We're all the same, it's the same thing. They're doing the same thing here that we're doing thousands of miles away. So I just want to end with this, if we can. I just want to talk real quick about the sacrificial love, if we can. You start in chapter 8, you talk about sacrificial love. You talk about contract versus covenant. And if we could just land the plane.
Yeah, we'll land this plane. And let me give context to this and kind of the whole talk. Whenever we're faced with these kinds of ideas of, I got to stand up for racism or whatever, Jesus is trying to make us like him. And unfortunately, we are a lot further than being like Jesus than we think. All of us, myself, all of us. And so when you hear these ideas, I want to challenge you as a church to go home and think, do I want to be more like Jesus? And is this, one, is it biblical and what we're going to say? And the kind of love, and the most basic thing, the number one commandment is love God with your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. So do you understand what kind of love he's talking about? Contractual love is, I'll love you if you do this for me. I'll love you if you agree with me. I'll love you if you're us, not them. I'll love you if you're not the other. I'll love you like me if you're like me.
Right.
That's not biblical love at all. That's worldly love. The biblical love is covenant love. Contractual love is I love you. By the way, a lot of people get divorced is because the spouse broke the contract.
Right.
Covenant love is I am making a decision to love you, period. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, it is a covenant. God, thank God, God loves me even despite things I do and say. That's the standard. So now we're in, and so if you offend me, if you disappoint me, if you scare me, and maybe the fear is all about me, but I'm scared anyway, I'm still going to love you.
Yeah.
That is a challenge, and that is the commandment. And when we do that, we are really being like Christ and fulfilling the greatest commandment. If we can't do that, we're just playing religion, and we're doing what the world does. And so then what's the difference? And Jesus said, you love your friends. Anybody can do that. Love your enemies as you love yourself.
So good. Pastor Miles, thanks so much for taking some time with us today. And we're in 21 Days of Prayer now as a church. We're in this Kingdom series. I would love for you to just pray for us as a church and just be praying for anybody who listens to this, who's on both for reconciliation, but that we would be able to live just with covenant love for one another.
100%. Lord, thank you so much for Soma. Thank you for Pastor Mike. Thank you for everyone in his church, connected to his church, watching this. We pray for covenant love. Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes up to the covenant you made to us and how consistently faithful you love us through all of our hard head decisions and comments and actions. Fill our heart with the covenant love that you have for us so we can express it to other people. And I just ask that we would look through your eyes at every single person we encounter and be reminded that they were made in the image of the same God to the same degree that we were, and that we would love them with your love. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen.
God bless you, man.
Thanks for joining us for Church at Home today. To join us in person on Sundays, visit us at soma.church for more details on location and upcoming events. You can also download Soma's podcast and app to stay connected in this season. Lastly, I want to thank everyone who serves at Soma and who gives to help make the vision go forward. Because of your generosity, we've been able to partner with the Backpack Program of Catawba, which serves families from 40 local schools. We also teamed up with Voice of Hope for Day 2020 to provide over 40,000 meals to our community. At Soma, we say generosity is our joy because we give to what we love. For more info on giving, you can visit soma.church/give or Soma Give to 77977. Thanks again for joining us for Church at Home. Hope you have a great week.